Okay, so let's get started with today's presentation. Um, we we are going to talk about politics. That is the monetary power versus the state power, and as is always relevant, and um, but we'll do it with through the perspective of Martinus' spiritual science or the Third Testament. And how we'll do that is we're going to go through and zoom in on the what is a state and what is the money in the world. What do they represent, and how can we get to the uh, living in a world where there's peace. And so basically, if you look at the symbol, which is Martinus' main symbol, we can see that, here it is, we have the world in the middle, or right here in the middle of the animal kingdom, orange culminating, going towards the star within the yellow, predominantly yellow, evolutionary step, which is the entrance or portal into the real human kingdom, or the true human kingdom, where there is peace and love, and that is absolute love or all love, and not just selfish love or romantic love, but that unconditional love and compassion for all life everywhere. And before we can get into that kingdom, we see that planet here is on its way counterclockwise in the evolutionary spiral towards the star, and the star representing the cosmic birth, or the baptism of cosmic consciousness. What that means is when the planet reaches this step in evolution, it will have attained or activated cosmic consciousness, which basically means that the planet has become spiritual, able to perceive spiritually instead of materialistically. And that means for the beings on the planet will be able to experience um, spiritually, so see the spiritual world and laws and principles of the invisible, immaterial realms. And but of course we also need to see or want to live in a material world that is perfect and peaceful, and with this unconditional love for everyone, yeah, and not just a few people hoarding all the monetary assets, and the mass of the people enslaved uh, through hard labor and whatever time they have to put in to make an existence in the world. So what does Martinez say about this monetary system versus basically money versus state? What do we do? What will happen in the future according to Martinez? So if we go into uh, this symbol here, we see that this orange ring represents the planet, and it is going through this band of consciousness, the white band with the stripes, and that is called the old world impulse, and it has its little top of the planet is inside the new world impulse, going towards the star. If you imagine the star would be up here, so the planet is moving that way. So there will be more and more of the new impulse, new world impulse coming into the planet energy systems, and thereby down down, transforming, trickling into the materialistic systems on the planet. So there'll be less and less of this old world impulse would gradually fade out, and the new world impulse will take over. In the interim, there are beings on the planet that are here in evolution and here. So some people on the planet are still inspired by the old world impulse, which is the religious impulse, where believing is enough. But the new world impulse is knowing is enough. We cannot only believe in things anymore. We have to know. We have to know what it is. So this is all the impulses with the natural sciences and research and scientists and so forth, but also the materialistic worldview and the anti-religious impulse, because we have outlived the ability to merely believe in outside authorities, such as priests and politicians and kings and leaders and gurus and so forth. We need to know for ourselves. And how do we find out? So what is the truth, and how do we go about finding what people are saying, finding the truth value of what people are saying? So that is these people here, and in those three, here, the one on the left here, where we see predominantly intelligence, green color, and a little not so much of the feeling, we see that these beings here are materialistic minded people. So these are the people who are really interested in money and business, making money, stock market, and assets, all the materialistic stuff, all these things that money can buy, and but also science, and also politicians are in this evolutionary step with predominant amount of relative strength, intelligence dominating, right? So politicians and businessmen and but what is really important here is what we're gonna find out, because if businessmen and politicians are running the world, that means that the world is run by money. And what we need to do, according to Martinez, we need to have the state be responsible for the money creation, and not private banks, for example. So, and that's kind of my own conclusion to put it in relation to what's going on in the world right now. But let's just read. There's a couple of pages of reading, and then we'll be done for the day. And of course, as always, all symbols are copyright of Martinez Institute. And this is from the Third Testament, Book 1. Livets Bog Book 1, Section 94. And I'm going to read 94 and some of 95 and 96. So it's about 3 sections. It shouldn't take too long. And after that, we'll see why a sovereign monetary system really is the way to go forward for the worlds, in order to avoid all these banking crises and bailouts by the government. So basically, the taxpayers are paying the irresponsible lending practices of private banks. So let's see what Martinez says about this. So as a religious concept and lifestyle, since a religious concept and lifestyle is the basic foundation for people's moral and physical behavior, The above-mentioned spiritual course towards unity cannot be brought about without causing a corresponding reflection in the material world. So that's what we talked about, the planet going into the real human kingdom towards the star. So it has to have the evolution of the planet, because it's there in evolution, entering the real human kingdom. It has to have a reflection of that spiritual evolution into the material world. That's what he's saying in the first sentence here. And so we see here that all phenomena, experiences, and events are aiming at unity. Just as terrestrial people aim for a common spiritual foundation, so they are also aiming for a common material foundation. As this expanding development is supported by the advancing growth of unselfishness and universal love caused by the divine creative principle, so all actions based on selfishness and therefore harmful to the community will come to dissolution or disintegration as two will dogmas and superstitions. The most conspicuous material mark left already by the light radiation. So the light radiation is that the new world impulse at the top of the planet, right? The orange ring there. That's the light radiation. So the most conspicuous material mark left already by the light radiation is the factor we mentioned earlier in this chapter under the term state power. State power is thus an institution of unselfishness, and the energy or power functioning and emanating from it is universal love. Hence, it is its task, the state's task, to ensure protection and justice for the single individual within a community. But as terrestrial people are not yet perfect, their universal love and with it their state power cannot be perfect either, but must be limited to the standard of justice and morality accepted by the general public of the time. So that's, he's basically just saying that the evolutionary state or maturity of the state is a reflection of the maturity or evolutionary state of the beings creating the state, which is self-evident. So, to the same extent that the spiritual qualifications of human beings develop their unselfishness and universal love, to the same degree will their state power also develop in the form of a system of law and justice, and to the same degree as it develops to be more and more protective to single individuals, so it becomes more and more an expression of love. The system of law and justice in the form of state government is thus not the final and finished result of the development of unselfishness and universal love in the community as a whole. It aims at a far higher goal. So, the system of law and justice in the form of state government is not the final result of the development or maturity of the individuals in unselfishness, right? But it aims at a far higher goal. So what is this goal? What is the goal of the state? To aim at a higher goal always means to overcome obstacles, and terrestrial people have indeed all kinds of obstacles to overcome before their system of law and justice reaches a better form than that which we now call state government. These obstacles are the results of a still remaining animal instinct of self-preservation in terrestrial mankind, based entirely on selfishness or egoism, being the opposite of the basis for state power, which is unselfishness or universal love. Of these two forms of energy, unselfishness and selfishness, the latter constitutes by far the largest part of the material in people's consciousness, so most people are selfish. In daily life, this will then express itself as everything coming under the concept of private interest, while unselfishness, on the other hand, expresses itself in everything coming under the concept of common interest. Private interest represents vestiges of the animal instinct of self-preservation, that is, every man for himself, while common interest constitutes the dawning humane consciousness in individuals, that is, it is more blessed to give than to receive. These two factors are the real concern of terrestrial mankind's consciousness. Since private interest still appears as the greatest factor in the consciousness of terrestrial mankind, so that's today, right? We still have private interest as the greatest factor of consciousness in people. So, since that is the case, this factor, private interest, will also be outwardly the strongest and most conspicuous or visible. As we recognize it, therefore, and we recognize it, therefore, as the principal basis for that reality we mentioned earlier under the concept of money power. So, private interest is money power, right? Private interest is therefore the principal basis for that reality we mentioned earlier on the concept of money power. Private interest equals money power. So, the greatest material power within the terrestrial community. So, money is private interest, and that's the greatest power right now in our society. Just as these two factors, selfishness and unselfishness, in the consciousness of the individual terrestrial person are to be described as constituting respectively the basis for so-called evil and so-called good, so the same two factors would also become the basis for a similar split in the total conscious mind of terrestrial mankind itself. And there the results of selfishness or money power will be evil, and the results of unselfishness or state power will be good. This analysis would also easily be confined when we see what these two realities mean to the whole of terrestrial mankind. Selfishness in the form of money power will thus signify to the community excess price on all necessities, commercial credit, poverty, suffering, and misery, which again, as we have already mentioned, lead to hate, revolution, war, mutilation, and illness. Unselfishness, in the form of state power, on the contrary, means to the community the development of law and justice for every citizen, free education, schools, hospitals, help to the needy, sick, and old, development of protection against robbery and looting and against shameless profit, the establishment of a police force, the development of transport, the laying out of parks, the building of museums, and the like. And on account of state power, social assets will be continually accumulating and increasing. So that's the common interest, right? All this does not mean, of course, that the representatives of money power are to be stamped as criminals, and I'm going to jump ahead, skip those two paragraphs. So the fundamental factor in world evolution will therefore be that state power, in the form of the system of law and justice, approaches perfection, while money power degenerates. State power, then, is actually the same as right coming into existence. And then this last piece here, section 96. So state power is right coming into existence. What is righteous? Gradually, the energies from the New World impulse will now build up the intelligence of individuals, and this is very important because she's saying that this new world impulse would actually have an influence on the beings that are living on the planet, right? So as the planet is getting more and more higher vibrations, getting closer and closer to attaining cosmic consciousness, the beings on the planet, and Martinus actually says that human beings are like the nerve cells of the planet. They will have to vibrate at this high new energy level of frequency, right? As the new world impulse is coming more and more into the world. Like we talked about in the beginning, the old world impulse is moving out, away from the planet, and more the new world impulse is coming in. So gradually, as these energies from the new world impulse will now build up the intelligence of individuals, and the majority of terrestrial people will have their eyes more and more open to the social evil still remaining to be overcome by state power, so that the great peace can come to rule on earth. Thus, they will gradually understand that before peace can become fundamental, all the last existing remains of the animal life principle will have to be removed from terrestrial mankind's consciousness. People must learn to see that these remains constitute the forbidden fruit, the enjoyment of which at the moment keeps them away from the garden of paradise, or the state of complete happiness. Furthermore, this fruit must be expressed as identical with everything that comes under the concept of fighting against the unification of might with right. All terrestrial people's experiences at the present time, in other words, the direct speech of life, in connection with the divine creative principles light world impulse, of which this book is an expression, shows that this is the only way to eliminate the state of terrestrial human suffering. The present collective experience of the whole terrestrial mankind will thus gradually bring all its concentration to bear on this factor, the unification of might with right. But as right within terrestrial mankind's community is the same as state power, and might within that community is the same as money power, the unification of right with might means that state power must have possession of the money power. Very important, yeah? Only right alone can possess the valuable goods. As right is represented by state power, and here state power is the evolved state power which is unselfish and all-loving, right? As right is represented by state power, and this again stands for common interest or unselfishness, while money power is the expression for private interest or selfishness, then the consequence will be that unselfishness appropriates might or the valuable goods. Well, let's read that one more time. As right is represented by state power, and this again stands for common interest or unselfishness, while money power is the expression for private interest or selfishness, then the consequence will be that unselfishness appropriates might or the valuable goods. So that means might is in the hand of the righteous or unselfish. Yeah. When the spirit of unselfishness controls the valuable goods and thereby has the power, only then can peace reign. Selfishness controlling might. Selfishness controlling might, as is still the case in the terrestrial community, can create only that spirit which makes war and strife into actualities. The spirit of right must therefore be made the ruler of the world. Right, which has now reached its highest manifestation in the form of state power, constitutes nothing more than a reality which is ruled by might. It must become a reality which rules might. So I mean, basically, this is what important here. When the spirit of unselfishness controls the valuable goods and thereby has the power, only then can peace reign. And we see this in the world. We see that because money is controlling the world, I mean, the money is the right, yeah? Whoever has the money has right to do whatever, yeah? That's how it is right now. Every man for himself, dog eat dog world, animal kingdom, yeah? So, whoever has the money has the power. But that will never generate peace. If we really want peace, we want the might or the money to be where it's right, righteous, which is unselfish, and that's the state. So, for example, we have the movement of what's called the sovereign monetary system or sovereign money. If you Google sovereign money, you'll see that there are state central banks that are looking into creating their own money. Because when the state controls the money, instead of the private banks creating money from lending out money, and because every time the private banks lend out money, they can create more money and more profit, and that what the shareholders like. So a lot of times they don't follow the economy, and they kind of run, having a bank run, which means banks are lending out more money than the economy is good for. So the banks overtake the economy, and that's how we get these bubbles all the time, and then the state has to come in and bail out the banks, and who's paying? All the taxpayers are paying. So why not just have the state central banks generate the money? And that's what the sovereign money is about, and it's very interesting, and Iceland is probably going to do it first. I was a little hazy on this last, what's she saying on this last sentence here? Selfishness controlling might. So if you have the power and you're selfish, right, as is still the case now in the world, terrestrial humanity can create only that spirit which makes one strive, yeah, intellectuality. So that's what we see in the world, right? For the weapons industry, they want wars because it's profitable, right? The spirit of right must therefore be made the ruler of the world. Right, which has now reached its highest manifestation in the form of state power, constitutes nothing more than a reality which is ruled by might. So that's today. The state is ruled by might because the state is not creating its own money, for example, right? Private banks are creating money. It must become a reality which rules might. Yeah, so the state must become a reality which rules might, and might is the money, right? So the state must print its own money. That's basically my take on it. So with that, let's see if there's any more things we can say. I don't think so. I think we basically just have to see what's happening with the sovereign money monetary systems, and how the central banks, the state central banks, choose to change to different systems. I know the Bank of England already changed step towards creating sovereign money. So, but basically, according to Martinez, the state has to have the power to create money and not private banks. So, and there will not be peace before. So let's just end on that note with that. I like that little thing he's saying here with when the spirit of unselfishness controls the valuable goods. That means when, in my interpretation, when the central banks, state central banks, create their own money and thereby has the power, only then can peace reign. So if we want peace, in my interpretation, the state central banks need to create their own money. And on that note, I thank you for today, and I hope we see you next Saturday and back at the normal time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Florida time, 11 a.m. next Saturday, the 15th. So thank you for today, and have a great week.